Hey guys, Captain Retro bringing you the 5th installment of the History of the Arcade in Attica video series. Today's topic is number 18, a topic that I'm sure many of you are keen to learn the history of. So, we'll start right at the beginning. The locomotive that we know as number 18 was built in 1920, only a couple years after the formal construction of the arcade in Attica as we know it. That was in 1917. Number 18, a Elco, or American Locomotive Company 280 wheel configuration, sometimes nicknamed a consolidation, was built for a sugar mill down in Cuba. However, things ended up falling through, and the locomotive ended up on the Boyne City Railroad in Michigan. The Boyne City is interesting in its own note. I will link a video in the description which will go into more depth, but to give you the brief strokes, number 18 worked freight lumber service, and the Boyne City was actually, or rather became famous, as much like the arcade in Attica in 1962, they ended up doing tourist excursions using a British steam locomotive, a tank engine, that they imported along with two coaches across the sea. They also had a 44-tonner, which was also painted in the GE Bars livery, same as the arcade in Attica's first units. So, past the Boyne City side of history, you can see these newspaper trimmings, which show the clippings, which show number 18 in its Boyne City livery. These were from a 1962 edition of the Boyne Citizen, which was the newspaper at the time. And after this, it was delivered to Arcade in 1962. In 1962, on the arcade in Attica, they had decided to raise some extra money by starting to provide tourism excursions to general public. It is interesting to note, as a side note moving forward, that the arcade in Attica has always been what is considered a common carrier, which is that they would transport both passengers and freight. Now, in 1926, the Edward Lewis book notes that there was 11,312 passengers moved by rail. However, a mere 2 years later, in 1928, that number would down to 2,374. And all the way in 1951, they were only they had only transported 8 people in the first quarter of 51. The decision was then made to cease passenger traffic around then, and being only freight, in 1957, the track washout caused the line north of North Java to subsequently be abandoned. Now having less track and no way to Attica to interchange, the railroad was seeking additional revenue and decided it would be a smart move to invest in excursion locomotives. They purchased number 18 in 1962, making it the first steam locomotive there since the last, which was number 6. It is interesting to note that between the years of 1951 and 1962, it is only a difference of 11 years that they decided to scrap their original, or at least sell off their original 2 wooden combines, which were used in proper commuter service. This would be where, from 2008 to 2015, the Arcade in Attica had repainted their coaches in green as a throwback to their original 2 coaches. Now, there you will be able to find video footage, and I will be showing some on this video, that show the train both with complete green coaches and also in 2015 when they started to switch back over to the classic orange color scheme. This led to a rather interesting visual of mixed consists. So, you might be asking, well, why number 18? I thought number 14 was the older steam locomotive. And I do believe that number 14 was built in 1917, making it the older locomotive. However, the arcade in Attica would not obtain number 14 until 1963, a year after 18 made its debut. A debut, in fact, which featured 2 coaches painted in Arcade in Attica with the circus lettering and Caboose 304, which is currently on display next to the Little Red Caboose ice cream shop, now currently under the name Coop's Red Caboose, I believe. However, this was painted orange and didn't have its cupola. The engine itself, in 1962, was a rather basic black paint job with the numbers on the cab and the letters on the tender, both in a very jazzy orange paint. No trim, nothing fancy. The wheels, however, were painted white. Now, number 18 would basically haul passenger excursions all through 62. However, once number 14 arrived, the 460 basically took all the limelight from number 18, and it was then, from that point, only used as a backup steam engine. A matter of fact, in these photographs from 1979, you can see that by the era of 14 being the showboat of the Arcade in Attica, number 18 didn't even have the honor. It was mostly black, but didn't even have the honor of bearing Arcade in Attica on the tender. There is, however, a photograph from 1964 from a private collection which shows number 18 dressed up for some sort of Centennial celebration featuring flags and the like all down the boiler and tender. And this photograph does feature Arcade in Attica on the tender. So the writing did last up until the 70s at least. Now, in an era where 14 was primarily the draw for people and the one that everyone was familiar with, number 18 was really used as a backup engine. It was just not super painted up a lot of the time. Color schemes in this era range by year, but it was either it had its cab painted in, or rather the cab lettering was really the only thing there. There would be trim applied on occasion, anywhere from white running boards to orange running boards to no running boards, to the wheels sometimes being shown as black, to the wheels sometimes being shown white-walled, or white, which is a trend that continues to this day. My running theory is that they basically paint them in white, and then once it starts getting faded to the point of not looking very great, they'll just paint it black completely until the next time that they're willing to reset the white, rather than touching up the white. And so it would serve in this capacity with its original tender, which you'll note looks like this, until around the 1990s, as the last recorded, like visually recorded run of number 14 is in 1988, and in 1989 it was withdrawn from service and officially retired. At this point, or shortly thereafter, the decision was made to swap the tender of number 14 and number 18, as the 14's tender had more room and more capacity. So ever since around this time frame, number 18 has been depicted with 14's tender. Please note that this also points to the fact that the one truck on the tender seen here, actually taken by me, still says Lake Superior and Escanaba, or LS and E on the one truck. The other truck has been raised to match the height of the couplers on the coaches. I believe that's the reasoning. So throughout the years, number 18 was pretty much relegated to only a backup until in an era after 14 was retired. In the 2000s, it was briefly painted with a silver smokebox, and I could not find any photographs of this on Google. However, if you go out of your way to join the Fans of the Arcade in Attica Facebook page, you will find plenty of photographs that I'm not willing to share because they are part of private collections. And I will, unless I have explicit permission, be it from Marty Peters or James Murphy, where I've been showing their content here, I will not show off the the photographs of the silver smokebox. So after the silver smokebox was deemed a little too gaudy for 18, it was changed to gray and thus was repainted into the scheme that I'm familiar with, which is a gray smokebox with light orange trim and sometimes white wheels, sometimes black wheels, like I mentioned earlier. And the font in this case is now a very simple type font, but it is white. I was also able to find this photograph, which is presumably from around 2016 to 2017, when number 18 was repainted into the 100-year anniversary scheme, a noticeable color difference. So number 18 wore this white font scheme all the way from about 2000 all the way up until 2016. It was overhauled once, I believe, during this time, directly after these photographs were taken, which were taken by my parents as I was young at the time and rode on the excursions. This makes this color scheme very nostalgic to me. However, it is not of true historical significance. It was rather just something different. Some things to mention in this era. The coaches were painted green in 2008, and thus most of the footage between 2008 and its 100-year anniversary will show green. In 2009 to 2010, the Coast number 6 made an appearance in arcade, running both solo with a handful of coaches, and by handful I only mean about 2, and double-heading with number 18, which I have footage of here. In 1976, the pair of steam locomotives, we're taking a step back in time, both number 14 and number 18 double-headed a passenger consist. And in 1981, number 18 made an appearance with number 111, hauling both a mixed train from the junction, this being shown here with the red ATSF boxcar, and also this shot here of a possibly separate, but not entirely sure, still 1981, trip to North Java, featuring both 111 in crew cut and number 18. In 2010, again, they double-headed, and this was a very busy time for the railroad, as around 2011, 2012 presumably, they were actually featuring number 18 in a couple segments of a movie called A Prince for Christmas, which is your pretty standard kind of romance movie. However, it premiered in 2015, and I'm just assuming that it took probably a couple years in production, although it could have been closer to that. The last thing of real interest is the fact that in 2017, the railroad celebrated its 100-year anniversary, and number 18 donned yet another paint job in the throwback scheme, which featured a graphite smokebox rather than a gray, and the font, although still in the same type of font, was now painted orange, reminiscent of the olden days. The locomotive was actually run on the Y and turned around to run tender forward for something different, and basically was featured prominently in all of the advertising for the 100th year anniversary. It was still in the white font scheme, they also pulled a freight consist consisting of just a couple of covered hoppers for a photo charter. There is pretty much a lot of footage of this on internet, so I'm not going to go over it. I might, however, throw in a photograph. In 2018, number 18 was officially slated for a rebuild, and the running gear would be sent. The tender actually had some interesting stuff done to it in 2018. They decided to look over number 18's old tender and found that it was pretty much unusable. So in an effort to keep number 14s in good shape, they actually contacted Maple Grove, who fabricated a brand new tender to sit on the tender chassis, and the old tender, which was starting to show its age, was actually sent to Illinois, I believe, either Illinois or Ohio, to be put on display with a B&O engine, which a museum had, and their tender that was paired with it was not the correct type. And so, number 18 technically received a brand new tender, which has yet to run behind it, as it was delivered in 2018 and promptly repainted into the same color scheme as was featured in 2017's 100-year anniversary. The other thing to mention is that if you were to go down to the yard now, you'll find a Gettysburg tender. This is originally off of Gettysburg number 76 and is slated to become 18's new tender should 14 ever return to service. The board of directors has been very adamant in saying that they will not sell number 14, nor will they put it on display as to worsen its condition, as if anything were to happen with 18, they feel that they would be able to bring 14 back, and in the event that both were to run, then 18 could give 14 its old tender back and have a brand new one in the form of Gettysburg 76s. As of right now, though, the tender just sits in the yard. So, that is really all we can say on number 18. It originally served in the Boyne City after falling through for a sugar mill order, and now resides currently, still its boiler is away in Syracuse, I believe. I was fortunate enough to witness the return of the running gear, and I was able to record most of that, so that's available on my channel. However, as of right now, the boiler is basically just set to come back whenever the FRA approves it and whenever the funds will allow it. I believe number 18 also needs a new smokebox fabricated. And the other interesting thing to note is that it was posted in 2017. However, I don't know when the picture was taken. I presume prior to 17. There is a photograph on the Fans of the Arcade in Attica Facebook group that shows number 18 with a completely fabricated new cab, which was made to basically comply with new requirements by the FRA. And so, over the years, it's kind of questionable just how much 18 has been still present, with a brand new tender swapped over from 14 and then rebuilt completely from scratch, aside from the original frame. It is kind of questionable. In addition to all this, number 18 has taken so many parts from number 14 that, as James Murphy put it, it's not so much that 18 is even with us anymore, but rather an amalgamation of number 14 and number 18 put together. A matter of fact, some of the iconic features that can be seen on 18 are remnants of number 14, whether it's the lamp, the whistle, the pilot. Number 14 now sits in the shop, missing a lot of equipment that has simply been used on 18 to keep her running over the years. And this is not just not only aesthetic things, but also mechanical and internal parts which have been swapped over. And so now we wait for the humble return of number 18 to bring a cloud of smoke above Arcade as it roars past the fire hall and across the Cattaraugus Creek into downtown Arcade. It's sure to happen soon, but no one's exactly sure when. And although it is nice to think that the railroad has already planned it out as to give number 18 another tender should 14 return to service, it should be noted that keeping one steam locomotive up in operation in 2022 is enough of a hassle that I don't know if 14 could be brought back. Furthermore, I would like to add the anecdote that if you are looking to see number 18 return, there is an active restoration fund that you can donate to, and I would also advise against not calling the railroad, simply asking if number 18 is back in service and hanging up. as the only way that 18 returns to service in a reasonably quick fashion is if the railroad has plenty of added income to throw at the construction of the firebox, and, well, we're pretty much just waiting on the boiler at this point. So I would recommend definitely writing the arcade in Attica, because I'm sure that just writing it, even if behind the simple diesel growl of 113, you are probably helping contribute to the railroad in some way, shape, or form. And so, with that being said, this brings the video on number 18 to a close. Next time we'll be looking at number 14, the second locomotive purchased for excursion service, and the one that at this point everybody has a tad bit of nostalgia for. Even I have a little bit of nostalgia for 14, or at least some sort of favoritism, as it is before my time. Much like I said in the diesel video, where I have a strong preference to crew cut, which I was able to confirm that after making my diesel video, crew cut was officially applied in 1966, further leading to my theory that it was due to the fact that with keeping track of the tourism railroad and the freight, it was more economical to paint them in a cheaper scheme, which meant that they could maintain their other equipment at a relatively easy pace. Number 14 may have been the one that attracted the most popularity between 1963 and 1989. However, it seems almost poetically fitting that number 18 now receives all of the attention and praise, considering that it is the first locomotive purchased by the ANA for excursion service. It's slightly poetic in that sense, in the same sense that an Elco steam locomotive works aside General Electric center cab switchers when General Electric was in charge of most of the electronics of the Elco diesels, until General Electric decided to start making locomotives on their own and then stopped pricing Elco fairly for electronics, forcing them out of the locomotive business. At least that was one of the contributing factors. So, in the meantime, I hope that everyone has enjoyed this video. The next one, as I said, will be on 14. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe, as seeing the feedback from these videos certainly is nice. And I know it's very amateur, so I'm always looking for advice. So with that being said, I will see you all on the next one.